Hello, my name is Craig Rainey, and I've been in the construction industry for more than 40 years. When homeowners tell me the story of their project, oftentimes it sounds like this. It doesn't have to be that way.
Oh, wise guy, eh?
And most builders would say that. Welcome to Remodeling Wisdom. I'm Craig Rainey. Let's get started. I appreciate y'all taking a moment to spend some time with me. And by the way, I really appreciate the influx of emails that's coming in. And this episode is about addressing some of those questions. And some of them are pretty insightful. They're things that a lot of them touched on my pet peeves in the industry. So, but again, like last time where I was a little more supportive of builders and how they price jobs and trying to be on their side, I'm going to again try to be a little more understanding of how people think of certain things in the industry and how they do it, including the pros. There are many products that are being sold to you as a consumer and being installed by professional tradespeople that either they are not going to perform as they're supposed to, or they were never designed to do what they're intended to do. And we're going to talk about that. But before we do, I would like to remind y'all that there is a like or subscribe button there, depending on which platform you're on. Just reach up there and click that. It's easy, fun to do. I do it all the time. If you'd like to get hold of me, the quickest way to do that is contact me on my email at craig@craigrainey.com. If you'd like to cyberstalk me, my website is craigrainey.com. For those of you who prefer the written word, pardon me, over the spoken word, I do have an online blog site, and it is at craigsbuilderblog.com or texasbuilderblog.com. They'll both get you there. And that's just more representative. And by the way, those of you all from last episode, you're still looking for that supplement, just haven't gotten around to it. A lot of things going on, and I do apologize. It's totally my fault. I'm not getting it done. I'm going to try to get that done this week, but with a pie chart, that kind of thing. But anyway, I really appreciate it. And the last point is, please contact me with any questions you've got. I really enjoy it. I'm enjoying a tremendous following right now, and I say enjoying it because it's nice to know that somebody's listening to what I'm saying. But more importantly, from the emails I'm getting, y'all are getting a benefit from it. And I listen to a lot of the other podcasts and the broadcasts that are going on, and a lot of them have to do with technical stuff, how you do things, and I always promise I'm going to get to that, and I will, because I've got a wealth of knowledge, being 43 years in the industry, and my great-granddad, my granddad, my dad, and I, we were all in the business, and I started off as an artisan, drove nails for a living, and I've done concrete and, all these kind of things. I've done a little bit of everything, so I have some insight, but as a working remodeling general contractor and new construction contractor, I see a lot every day, and a lot of those things will pique my interest in sharing it with you. And this is one of those things. So let's get to it. I was mentioning earlier that there are a lot of products and services that are sold to the general public and are installed by professionals, and these professionals will absolutely stand behind it. One that comes to mind is tankless water heaters. And there's not a project I look at that somebody doesn't talk to me about tankless water heaters. And they say, well, are you a fan? And I tell them, yes, I am a fan of the tankless water heater, but I'm not a fan. Well, let me put it this way. I'm not a fan of a tankless water heater the way that it's being used today and the way it's being marketed and sold to you as a consumer, because that's not what it was intended to do. The majority of the plumbers out there and those Renai and those others who are manufacturing this, they say, well, you don't want 80 gallons of water sitting in your house, or 60 gallons, depending on the size of the tank. They talk about weight, the chance of a leak, this kind of thing, all these different things that could happen. And they say it's much better just to have this processing unit in your garage or in some utility area, to where as the water comes in, it heats the water and sends it to your house. Okay. Just on the surface of that, there are a lot of incongruencies that I think that we need to address. Okay, and so let's go back. A tankless water heater is not called a tankless water heater. It was invented in Germany as an on-demand water heater. In other words, what they wanted to do, because it's a cold climate at times, and it's used everywhere, but you want to turn the water on and have immediate hot water. That was the function. That was the benefit. That's what the inventor, the designer wanted it to do. And these have been around longer than water heaters have been around. There was on-demand water heater before finally somebody decided, you know what, we're going to store 80 gallons of hot water in the house, that way you got it anytime you need it. Now, the way that it's installed now, and I know because my plumber and we've argued about this. I've done a lot of research. I put together, if you look at my blog site, I do have an article on it. It was picked up by one of the larger newspapers, and they republished it online. And they said, hey, this is some great information, but I did a lot of research on it. And I'm not going to bore you with the research. You can read the article if you want to know more about it. But essentially, if you have a large water heating element in your garage or in some utility area, that is typically on the opposite side of the house from, let's say, the primary bedroom and the ensuite, or the place where you're really going to use that water. There might be a laundry room there, or perhaps a powder room or a mud room. That they'll get the quick benefit from that. But you still, if let's say you're in your ensuite and you turn that shower on, you're still going to have to wait and waste a lot of water before it gets hot. And so it's really not, what's the difference between having this expensive heating element in there and just having 80 gallons of water up in your attic? Now they're going to say, they being who are selling these pieces of equipment, they're going to go, well, it's a lot of weight, so the structure and everything else. Well, as somebody who builds, I know that we build to the level that we don't minimalize this thing. We're going to build with enough live and dead load capacity to where you could pretty much put water heaters throughout your attic and it's not going to collapse it. Now there are certain limitations to that, but overall, with how we rate ceiling joists and the stiff backs and the structure we put up there and the bracing, it could support the weight. The weight is not an issue. So they say, okay, well, you could have a leak and it could ruin your sheetrock or ruin your structure or water rot. Well, all cities and even the manufacturers of these water heaters, they have many things on there, including overflow bladders, but they also have secondary containment with drains. In fact, there's not a municipality that is not inspecting for drains, either or both your water heater and your air conditioning. And I know because we get inspected on all the time, but it creates an overflow pan. If it were to leak or to fail, all that water would go down through the pan and down to go into the drain and then through the sewer and so forth, and that's what it does. There are also some overflows depending on the municipality, which goes directly outside. But anyway, that's not an issue. That's not a problem. But those are the two major things they address. Now, the thing that it doesn't address, and I'm talking about the tankless water heater, is if you've got it in the garage, it means instead of having 80 gallons of water in a tank, you now have 80 to 100 gallons of water in pipes throughout your house. And it's all cold water, or best case scenario, 72-degree water because it's room temperature. So you still have that flow. You're still not going to have that immediate water. So for those of you who are environmentally responsible, well, you're throwing a lot of good water, your unused water out, down into the sewer that's got to be reprocessed and lost to whatever it may be. And so, I mean, it's not a good thing. So the on-demand water heaters that I've installed, those typically they will go either on a wall in a common area, which is right there, so they're very close to where it's going to be used, or they also have some really nice under-counter ones that can be used. And those under-counter ones, they come in both gas and, well, not the under-counter isn't gas, but electric. So we install a lot of those, and typically they've got enough cubic feet per minute to serve, let's say, a bathroom and a laundry room or something like that. But typically we'll have one in the kitchen, one in the laundry room, powder room. You'll have one in your master, and you might have one in the hall bath or secondary bathroom. But that's something you want to get with either your builder, who's probably on board with putting a tankless unit in your garage, which I would not recommend, but they're doing that. But if you talk to somebody who knows, they can tell you how to do this. Now, my biggest dispute I have with my plumbers is they talk about water flow, how much it will serve. Well, the CFM on those is, and I'm not going to go into detail, again, that is in that article, but you can find electric units that will fit under your countertop that will more than adequately serve a bathroom or a kitchen or whatever it may be. plenty of water. It's pretty easy to install these. You have to do some modifications to the plumbing underneath and the electrical also underneath your vanity. But that's one of those things that if you go into a remodel with that in mind, then you can address that. But that's one of the things you have to look at. Excuse me, I had to sneeze for a second. Forgive me. Okay. I didn't want to do that in the microphone. So, the on-demand water heaters, it's an idea that was a great idea when it came out. It still is a good idea, but you need to make sure that those are properly installed and utilized and not just thrown in there because somebody wants to get rid of 80 gallons of water. In places like the Houston area where they have hurricanes and they lose power a lot of the builders and remodelers I've talked to, and I'm a believer in this, they like having an extra 80 gallons of water in the attic. So if they do have the water that goes out, they still have 80 gallons of water they can pull from. And that's something to be considered, which with a tankless unit, to use the euphemism, you won't have that. And so the second thing is pocket doors. And I ran into this one. I did a design, and this particular client, for whatever reason, they talked to an interior designer who also does some architectural design, apparently. Anyway, so they did some modifications on the drawing that I did for them. And when I looked at it, this was a couple days ago, and I found, wow, why are all these pocket doors in here? And apparently the designer had decided they wanted to put pocket doors in all these different areas for whatever reason. I guess they don't want doors swinging or whatever. Well, there are only legitimately two reasons for pocket doors as a builder. The first one is, let's say that you have a wide doorway, and you want to keep that open most of the time. Well, pocket doors are great because then you don't have doors hanging from outside the wall and you see these doors. It's something you can open those pocket doors, and let's say it's going to be open most of the time into a study or an office or into a dining area or some other area that's not used that often, but it is used. You can pull those pocket doors. They're inside the wall, so it looks like just a standard walk-through doorway. But in the case that you need some intimacy or privacy, or you want to come back out sound, you can close those doors. That's one, and that's the biggest reason. That is the number one reason they're used. The second one is in the case of remodel where you don't have enough room in the build for the swing of a door. Let's say that you're trying to put an extra bedroom in, but that bedroom doesn't have enough room in it or an office, and it doesn't have enough room for the swing of the doors. So you'll do that. But that's a really, that's a Band-Aid. That's not a good solution for a designer. And if your architectural designer is putting a lot of pocket doors in your build, that shows a lack of imagination. There are some things that you can do on layout and this kind of thing. And when I'm talking to clients, a lot of time what they'll tell me is they'll say, well, you're going to have to cut concrete. You have to cut concrete for this, or, you're going to have to move this bearing wall. And, that's just a lot of work. And, maybe we should just do this instead. And understand, as a remodeler, I cut concrete every day. I remove bearing walls and put either floating or ceiling beams or protruding or whatever. I put structure in there all the time. I could turn your house into a warehouse and there would be no interior walls. That's how easily, I should say simply, that's how simply you can remove a bearing wall. So if you've got somebody that doesn't know what they're doing and they don't have experience with this, they're going to look at that as something as something that's difficult. So when I talk about putting in a swing door and being creative and moving things around, that may involve adding some square footage to, for instance, a toilet room or something where we're going to put a pocket door in there. Well, why don't you just go ahead and make it where you've got enough room, around 6 feet or so, where you can have a toilet, and you can also open that 30-inch door into the toilet room, and it's got enough room to open, and you can still use the space. And don't put a pocket door in there. Anytime you put a pocket door in, the frame is twice the size of the door. So in the case of a 30-inch pocket door, you've got 60 inches. That's 5 feet, and give or take. You've also got roof opening. That you can't nail anything in there. The way you install your sheetrock is going to be critical, so you don't drive a screw into the door and it won't open or close or scratch it. You can't hang. A lot of times you can't hang towel bars on it, or you can't you can't affix a cabinet to it. It really limits what you can do with that wall structurally, and not structurally, but utilitarianly. Structurally, you have a header up there. That's not the problem. I misspoke. But pocket doors are something you really got to watch, because pocket doors were created with a particular use in mind. And the first use was that we want to have this space, we want an open doorway, but every now and then we might want to sequester that area. So the next one is mini splits. I get a lot of questions about from my clients whether I should use a mini split or whether I should put an air conditioning HVAC unit in there, so forth. And most of those questions are asked without any understanding of what a mini split is and what it looks like and how it works. Oftentimes, mini splits are compared with motel or hotel air conditioning units that are typically under a window, and it's sitting there, and it's just a big rectangular long air conditioning unit that pumps out air, and it's got, part of it sits outside, part of it sits inside, and it runs and so forth. Well, that is more akin to a window unit than it is central HVAC. And again, not too much detail, but just want you to know this. Now, a mini split always has an outside condenser, compressor to it. It's always got that. It's got an indoor unit, which on the inside, it looks just like that motel unit as far as it's a long, wide thing, and it sits typically up higher in the wall, so it's higher up. But it does have that. It compresses Freon, an outside unit, and so forth. So you're always going to have that HVAC look to it, and that you're going to have an outdoor unit and you have an indoor unit. It's just instead of having a concealed air handler either in the attic or in an HVAC closet, all that air handler and everything is exposed to the inside of the house. It's not a good look. If you need it for something primitive, if let's say you've got a man cave or a she shed or something like that out there, that's fine. You can use that. But keep this in mind: they're not that inexpensive. You're going to spend on a ton and a half unit installed with a bona fide contractor. You're going to spend up to $5,000, $6,000 on that unit. It's just what it is, and it could be more than that. Well, you're not going to spend much more on a standard central HVAC unit. So if you're adding a room addition to your house, and you decide, okay, well, my air conditioner will not handle this load, so I'm going to go mini split. I think that you should really look at going with a secondary HVAC unit, kind of like with a 2-story house. You have an upstairs and a downstairs HVAC unit, each separately, and you should consider doing that with your room addition as well. And because your mini split is going to be, to me, now this is personal, it's ugly because you've got this window unit that's hanging inside your wall, and it's loud, and then you've still got a compressor unit outside. So I mean, you're not saving any space, any aesthetically, you're suffering. There's just no real reason for one, unless, like I said, you got a she shed and there's no AC unit, you decide you want to do it, and you've got a place behind it between that and the fence where you can put this compressor unit in there. I mean, that's fine if you want to do that, but very limited uses, and I would not recommend that you use one in a primary residence where you just don't have enough capacity in your existing unit. So I would recommend that. Next thing let's talk about roof vents. And this is something that builders don't understand this. And most HVAC contractors out there do. They don't really get into it with the builder because it's a losing battle. But gable vents, roof vents, whirlybirds, the turbine vents that go up on top, electric exhaust vents that are put in the attic, all this to transfer air out of the attic. These things are very misunderstood. And the reason I say it is this. Now, in a typical construction, what I will do is I will have eave vents under the soffit, under the overhang, those either perforated hardy, or you'll have those vents that go under there. And then I will have a ridge vent at the peak of the roof in the shingles. And the reason for it is that it'll pull that air from the eaves all the way through the attic and up through the ridge. Now, a lot of times you'll see gable vents in there too. So they'll have the eave, they'll have the ridge vent, then have gable vents. Now, if you ever see that done, what is happening is the gable vents, although they're designed to exhaust heat, air by nature is lazy. It does not. It takes the path of least resistance. So what's going to happen is that ridge vent, being that heat rises, that ridge vent is going to draw, and it's going to draw from the closest source, which is the gable vent. So the gable vent's going to basically be an intake, and the ridge vent's an exhaust. And I'm sorry, this is the spoken word, so this can get a little thick, and I apologize. I'll go as quickly as I can. So if you've got gable vents in your attic, and you've got ridge vents, and you've got soffit vents, those gable vents are shortcutting your air exchange in your attic to where it's not going to be effective. Only the top part of your attic is going to vent, which means you're not going to have any airflow from the bottom. So what I do on some of the remodels that I do is I will cover those gable vents. I don't always pull them out. If they're okay, we'll do it, and then we'll re-side it. But if it's a brick or something where you just can't do it, or budget constraints say, we don't have the money to do this, on the inside I typically will seal those off, plastic, wood, rubber, whatever it may be, and I'll seal those off so that way that attic will vent properly. And by the way, all this information comes from classes you can take, HVAC classes. A lot of this information is online. You just have to look the right place. And having to do with that also is insulating, over-insulating. A lot of people do that. Foam. There's such a big debate about insulation. And, a couple things. And let me say something that will demonstrate this. What is the most sustainable building product? The number one sustainable building product in the world? I'll give you a second. Ladies and gentlemen, it's lumber. It's wood. That is the number one sustainable building product. Has nothing to do with what we're talking about except for this. The fundamentals of the industry sometimes are the right answer. Not everything has to do with innovation and change. A lot of it is, if it ain't fixed, don't broke it. Easier for me to say. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So in the case of insulation, the best insulator is dead air space. The reason that your insulated windows work so well is because of dead airspace. The glass is not insulated, but the dead airspace is. If you can create a dead airspace, you can achieve the maximum insulation. You take a look at a foam beer cooler ice chest. Well, they're not good. Ice doesn't last very long in a ice chest. Just a typical cheap one has foam in it because it's not very insulative. It doesn't have dead airspace. Inside it does, inside the foam, but you've also got BTU transference. There are a lot of things that go along with this, but dead airspace is the best. Just if you can afford $1 million, cut open a Yeti and take a look at how it's made. There's not a foam insulated barrier in there. It's much more advanced than that, but they're achieving dead airspace and they're maximizing dead airspace in the construction of this. Your home is no different. If you've got 2x4 walls, you don't want to go any thicker than R13 insulation. Okay, I've seen people stuff R19 in there, and once you compress that fiberglass, it doesn't have the capacity to insulate anymore. It's just a solid barrier, so it's not going to insulate. R13 properly fluffed is going to insulate better than R19 compressed in a wall. Just a fact. That's the way it is. So when people talk about putting foam in the walls, they talk about putting extra insulation in the walls and compressing that. It's like taking too many aspirin. 2 aspirin's enough. 2 Tylenol's enough. Don't take the bottle. It's not going to be good for you. Same thing with insulation. And that's one of the things. Here in Austin, we have a minimum, and it's very interesting. We have a minimum in the attic of R38, and we have a minimum in the walls of, I think it's R16, R18, something like that. It's not R19. Something R16. So in a 2x4 walls, what they're putting in there is you do put the R13 insulation in there, but they also are counting the Tyvek, the how much your sheathing and your siding, your sheetrock, all that adds R value. Very little, but it adds some to it. And so if they're just encouraging the builder to make sure that they put a vapor barrier in, they sheathe that wall, and then they put the final product, whether it's masonry or siding or whatever over that. So these are things, but just remember, dead air space is the way to go. When people talk to you about spending $25,000 putting foam in your attic, well, 2 things. One is it's not going to give you a whole lot of insulation. I'd say if you foam your ceiling joist and your roof rafters, well, I guess your attic becomes a dead air space. Not sure about that, but then it also says you're supposed to have air exchange. So that means that your soffit vents and your ridge vent is now counteracting the insulated value of your dead air space, which is your attic. So anyway, just houses were never built to be energy efficient. Making a home airtight, energy efficient, I could as easily make my truck into a tugboat. It's no longer a house. And the folks that are working with houses and they're trying to make them better and innovative, well, they're on the right track. I really think they are, because your standard house was built to keep varmints and evildoers out and rain out and make it safe and pretty much hospitable environmentally. So, I mean, you're comfortable in there. But it was never designed to be airtight. It was never designed to, put you in a bubble. It's just not one of those things. So, if that's something that really fires you and you really want to get that done, a conventionally built house probably isn't something that's going to satisfy you on that. So, insulation is something that I do spend some time on. Over insulation, anyway. So let's talk about foundations for a second, and we're covering quite the array of things here. But I talk a lot to engineers about post-tension, and I talk a lot to homeowners who were doing an addition or we're building a new home. They say, well, should we go post-tension? Well, post-tension has totally to do with two applications. One, is it residential or is it commercial? And the second one is, what is the plasticity or the stability of your soil beneath it? Post-tension, I'm a fan, but post-tension is not necessary in every application. I'll give you an example. When I was building in San Antonio, they have a subdivision out there. It's an older one. When I was building it, it was new, called Timberwood Park. Well, Timberwood Park, most of it sits on top of a limestone shale. It sits on top of a shelf of limestone. In fact, the limestone is so hard and dense that we would not dig beams into the ground. We would not dig into the ground for the foundation. We built above the ground. So we'd scrape the topsoil off. We would go in and prep it, and then we'd build above it, and then we would build our structural beams, which are those channels that are built on the outside perimeter and whenever bearing walls are. And we would just sandbag those. So we would create them. We wouldn't dig them. We'd actually build up. And so we built our foundation above the ground. In that application, you don't need post-tension. A standard tied rebar and steel foundation is going to be just fine. You're not going to have any problems with it. The ground's not going to shift, any of that kind of thing. Now, down in Houston, I built one. We built an 8,400 square foot house, and we had 5,000 square feet of foundation on the ground. Well, it's funny. We bored, I guess, 6 or 7 different core samples, went pretty deep, and we found that the water table was really close up, and essentially we were building on something that was just short of a swamp. So it's possible that you're going to have some deflection in that slab, because as the ground gave in certain places with moisture or whatever, you'd find that slab would want to give, and that was weak areas, so it might break. So what we did is we went in with post-tension. And post-tension, what that is you've got heavy-duty, high-tension cables that are wrapped in rubber insulation, if you want to call it that. It just protects those tendrils from rusting. And then what happens is you're done, those cables stick out all around the slab, and then once the foundation achieves a certain amount of cure, and it's no longer green, and it will support it, because you don't want to, anyway, it doesn't matter what you want to do. Let me go through it. Then you have a company that comes in and they tighten those post-tension cables up to 20, 30,000 pounds or more. And what that does is it binds that foundation together to where it is one large unit. So it doesn't matter how much rebar you have in it, how many beams are in it. It's one big unit. And it's very technical. Those when you pour that concrete, those tendrils have to have the certain amount of sway to them, a certain amount of arch. They have to dip a certain amount, and so forth. And it's very, very engineer centric, and it's very technical. But in something like that, a standard monolithic slab without tendrils, without the post tension on it, if we had a weak spot, it would have basically broken that slab, and you would have seen cracks in the top of it where that slab was deflecting, where it was bending. And so post-tension, that is the application for that. So, don't go through the expense of getting a post-tension slab if you don't need it. Make sure that you do your due diligence and make sure your builder knows what they're talking about. But slabs are a big one. It's something I get a lot of questions on. And then let's talk about stairs for a second. I have some friends of mine who they bought a house, really nice house, a nice area, and they decided to put a pool in there. But the house, because of the terrain, the back of the house was quite a bit above the backyard. So they thought, okay, we're going to, put stairs in on this. And because it had a set of stairs, but they're putting a pool back there and an entertaining area. So they decided to put stairs all the way through, and it's an L-shaped patio. And they wanted stairs everywhere. So no matter where you are in that patio, you can walk downstairs down to the backyard. It's not really a good idea to do that. And let me explain, because stairs, they don't just help you descend or ascend to and from one point to the other. Stairs are a really valuable tool in directing traffic. Now, whenever I do design, the two things that I focus on are traffic flow and space optimization, because I do a lot of remodeling, and a lot of times I have to work within the footprint. And any of you who have listened to me about design drawings on that particular episode, you know what I'm talking about. But you want to direct the traffic that's there. Now, everybody seems to think whenever they're doing a design, and I run into this all the time, it's like they're running a resort, or they're going to have parties 300 days a year. Most of these folks I talk to, I'll ask them, so, you want a 10-foot long island and 4 feet deep, and you want to have, a back deck that's 30 feet long and 14 feet wide, and, you want all these stairs coming off of this L where no matter where somebody is, they can get down to the pool area. Well, how often do you have parties so big that you would use this? Without exception, all of them tell me a couple times a year, maybe 3. So you're going to build this resort, and you're going to make the capacity where you could entertain 50, 75 people when there are only 3 of you living in this house and using this space. That's not a practical way to use it. So with stairs, what you want to do is you want to make sure that those stairs maintain the privacy of your home and maintain those traffic areas. So when somebody comes out the back door onto this patio, you want those stairs right in front of that door to go down. And then when it goes down, they can go left or right, whichever way they want to. And you can direct that too. In fact, this particular one, they have a hot tub sitting right in front of the stairs where it would be. And I went, well, why would you have a hot tub there? Because the designer talked them into it, said, oh, well, look at what a beautiful feature this hot tub is. Well, now somebody goes down the stairs, they now have to either go left or right around the hot tub to get to the pool. It's just not a good layout. Traffic flow is key. You want to sequester these areas. When I do kitchens, invariably, and one side of the kitchen you walk into, the other side there's either a laundry room, a garage, or a back door into the backyard, which makes that kitchen into a hallway. It's a very expensive, very dangerous hallway. You've got sharp knives and flames and boiling water and everything else, and you got somebody walking through the middle of it, some kids with their bikes or whatever it may be. That becomes a traffic area. I try to sequester that area so that it's safer. Those folks that are working in the kitchen, I like to cook. I like to have my space. When you go in the kitchen, you're going in the kitchen to work to do something specific. You're not going through there to get to the backyard or the garage to go to the car or anything like that. That's what's important. So with stairs, remember, stairs are a way of routing people from point A to point B, and where you place your stairs in your build it's a key factor in your design. So the next one is going to be, let's talk something about the real estate industry a little bit, and let's talk about the perception of what's being sold there and how you use that. The first thing is, let me talk to you about real estate inspectors. Real estate inspectors are not construction inspectors. They are people that are going to make sure that where the grass is growing, your irrigation system works, that you've got a certain number of plugs and light switches and this and that. I mean, they're going to look at the basic, just below the aesthetics. I mean, they'll catch you. Oh yeah, you got pests in here, or whatever it may be. They're going to find those things. But you cannot count on these folks to give you an opinion on the structure of your home. They may say, oh, well, you got some cracks in the sheetrock, so that indicates foundation damage. It doesn't. Not always. It does sometimes, but a lot of times it doesn't. It depends on what that damage looks like. I've seen a lot of cracks that were just because the tape flow texture painter guys weren't very good at what they did. So don't count on your building inspector to find construction issues. You need to hire somebody who has a construction background. I recommend engineers. They're really good at this, and that's what they get paid to do, or a really good builder, somebody with the experience like I have, or somebody of my ilk that can come in and say, okay, well, these are the things you look for. There's a house that my wife are looking to buy. We're buying a ranch in West Texas, and we're going to do a remodel on it. This house was built in 1920, and it's a pit. People look at it, they go, oh, it's scaring the heck out of people. Nobody wants to buy it because they look at this house. I look at it this way. I go, man, it's got good bones. And by the way, I've had so many realtors tell me things have good bones, and they do not. I was in one. I was looking at a house over in West Texas, and the realtor says immediately, "Hey, this house, it's got good bones. It's got a lot of ways you could go." Well, it was built in the 1880s. These people obviously did not get any engineering, because I walked on the second floor above the dining room, and it was like walking on a trampoline. They obviously used 2x6 joists, and I was up there, and I'm 200 plus pounds, and I was up there with a big old boy realtor, and we're up there and we're bouncing around, and stuff's falling off the furniture because we're deflecting the ceiling so much. So it did not have good bones. But this house from the 1920s, it does. And the things I look for is, first thing I did is looked at the roof line. The roof line will tell you everything you want to know about the foundation of a house. You just look at that roof line, and it will tell you if the foundation is good or not. So I looked at it, very square, looked good. It looked solid. I looked down the walls, and I looked to see whether there's ripple to them. Is there a little left and right as I'm looking down it? It looked pretty good. Foundation looked good. So overall, in fact, the foundation's pier and beam, and they were using cedar stumps under it is what they used. And people go, "Oh, you don't like that?" I have no problem with cedar stumps. I really don't. I don't want to go into that here, but I mean, what I did is I looked at it and go, this does have good bones. In fact, the realtor didn't tell me that. The realtor was thinking, well, I hope there's something you can do with this house, because everybody's talking about just bulldozing and getting rid of it. And it's an old cattle ranch from the 1800s that has been cut up into different acreages. And this house, barn, fenced area, 2 wells. I mean, it's a great place. It's something that I think I can really make into something that's a beautiful home. So anyway, I look at it from a different point of view than a real estate inspector is going to look at it. And that's the eye that you're going to need if you're actually going to make a buying decision on that. And so that takes me to barn dominiums, talking about being out in the country. And I get calls every now and then. Somebody says, "Hey, do you build barn dominiums?" And the answer overall that I have for them is no. And the reason for it is because I don't do low-cost housing. A barn dominium, where it came from, is somebody a long time ago had an old barn on a piece of property, and they turned the barn into a house. That's a barn dominium. So now what that will indicate, and there are certain places where you have luxury barn dominiums, which to me is an oxymoron, but basically it's a metal building, because metal's cheap, foundation metal, throw that building up, and then you finish out the inside like a house. I don't do that. That is, I don't think barn dominiums have a lot of creativity to them. I think it's all about the budget. It's all about getting to a place that is cheap. And now, because it's so chic, just like the on-demand water heater, it's now tankless. Everybody's convinced, well, this is what we want to do because it's very chic and it's very happening. It's now. It's modern. It's trendy. That does not a quality structure make. And for me, when I build, I only have 2 grades. I have A and I have F, and that includes the conception of how it's going to go together. And so, barn dominiums, keep in mind what you're doing is you're taking the idea that somebody had, I'm going to save some money and turn this whole building into something I could live in. I don't see why somebody would build one from scratch and go, "Oh yeah, I live in a barn dominium." But again, to each its own. It's your money, spend it how you want to. Speaking of realtors, I've always had a problem with heated versus non-heated areas. And in fact, as a framer, I was one of the bigger framers in South Texas. I had 42 men and women occasionally, but mainly men working for me. And we did a lot of work. And I talked to a builder one time, and so we were talking about building a bunch of tract homes in a neighborhood, which I didn't typically do, but we were slowing down. It was economically feasible for me to look at keeping my guys busy by doing less than custom work. So I said, okay, well, what are you going to do? Anyway, so we went through it real easy. I could build these pretty quickly. And he says, and I'm going to pay X amount per square foot, but that's only for heated area. And I said, what? And he goes, well, I'm only going to pay you this much for the heated area. And I said, so you don't want me to build a garage for you? He goes, well, of course I want you to build a garage for me. I said, well, you're not going to pay me for it? He goes, well, it's not heated area, so it's not the same. And so I asked him this. I said, okay, well, I hear what you're saying, and I've heard realtors say it, and honestly, I disagree with it, but let me tell you why I disagree with it. What is the difference in building your garage as opposed to building a bedroom? I'm being paid for the bedroom, not the garage. What is the difference? And he goes, well, it's not heated. Okay. And I said, the only difference, well, there are 2, but one that you'll understand and agree with is it just doesn't have air conditioning, because all these were sheetrocked. All these were framed. They had windows in them. They had garage doors. They had an entry door. It's all the same, except there's no air conditioning vents. Well, what does that have to do with me as a framer cornice guy? Nothing. The one thing about a garage that doesn't occur in a bedroom is it has a lot of structural beams, because typically you're spanning 20, 24 feet, and those ceiling joists won't span that. You're going to have to put a double LVL in there, or 2x12. I don't think 2x12, but you're going to have to put something in there, a structural component, so those joists will meet in the middle of that span. Well, that's more work than a bedroom. Most bedrooms, I just run 2 baits across there, run a stiff back, and I'm finished. So it's more expensive for me to build it. Not to mention, it's a big room, minimum 24 by 20. A lot of times they're bigger than that. So it's a bigger room with more structure and more components to it. And it's going to cost me more to build it, but he didn't want to charge me. He didn't want me to charge him for that. So what I'm saying is the heated opposed to non-heated. Anytime you go to buy a house, I include the whole square footage. And the reason they do that is they want to let you know about living square footage. Because I've got a three-car garage, and that 3-car garage is 24 by, I guess, 30. So, I mean, it's almost 700 square feet. And admittedly, my cars live there, and I've got a shop in Bay 3 over there, but that doesn't mean that it didn't involve the same amount of structure, and it doesn't also have to do with your appraised value and so forth. So be careful when you're talking heated and cooled area. With this builder, I didn't do business with him, not because of that. There were other reasons, but I'll just tell you what it is. Anybody that's going to debate me over not paying me for heated area is not going to pay me very much per square foot anyway, and I don't do cheap work. I have 2 grades, A and F, and you don't get A cheap or for free. So that's the reason I didn't do that. It's more of a philosophical difference, I would say. So, just be careful with your heated and your cooled. And finally, let's talk about permitting. I've got a client, and now I'll tell you this, I always encourage people to pull permits. If it's required by the municipality or whomever the governmental authority is, you should do it. But there are times when I've done the occasional in the past job where we didn't pull a permit. Let's say that we're renovating a bathroom and, we're changing some things out, doing some tile work and everything else. Well, a lot of times, and it's up to the owner. The owner decides they don't want to pull permits. They don't want that extra expense. Okay, whatever. So, I've been involved in that before, and most builders have. We just don't talk about it. And, typically the city is they're overworked, so they're not going to find it. But this client gave me this reason they wanted to pull a permit on their bathroom remodel. They said, well, we just want to make sure that we get inspected. We want to make sure that the quality's there, and so we want the city involved. And I said, okay, that's fine. Couple things that you need to know. First off, your expenses are going to go up. The plumber is going to charge more because he has to pull a permit. He has to go the inspection process. It's going to slow the job down, so he's going to charge more. You're going to have a full set of construction drawings for this. You can't just go with a little diagram or a table drawing. You're going to have full blueprints on it, and they're going to have to be engineered. So you're looking at cost-wise, just cost, and of course, if they're paying for this themselves, is what they'll pay. Design is going to cost about $2,500 to get those blueprints. It's going to cost you probably $1,500 for engineering on it, and then permit expediter. I use an expediter. I've talked about Jennifer in the past, $1,500 for that or so, and then your plumber. Like I said, it's just going to be a lot more. And here is the downside, because we can still justify saying, well, I get the protection of inspection, so I know it's going to go well. Ladies and gentlemen, inspectors do not inspect for quality. City permit inspectors do not inspect for quality. They inspect for function, only for function. Is it built in a way that it will perform to this level? Your final inspection, after you've gone through, now you do framing, which we don't do framing inspections. I have everything engineered, so my engineer, he'll inspect and he certifies it and puts an engineer seal on everything. So, I mean, that's a different deal. But let's take a look at plumbing, electrical, that kind of thing in the final inspection. So plumbing, electrical, they want to make sure the drains are in the right place. They're in the right distance away from the up vents. They want to make sure that your gas is a certain way, your gas meters are a certain distance from your windows, and they want to make sure that you've got X number of arc faults and certain number of GFCIs and where they are and everything else. They want to make sure your 220s in a certain way. They go through all those things because those are perfunctory. Those are the functionality, utilitarian aspects of it. But in your final inspection, which is always the last one, there is not a building inspector ever that has said, this texture isn't quite right. Yeah, and I don't think this door is going to close right. It's not really level. That doesn't look good to me. I'm not sure we're going to be able to do that. And there's nobody who's a building inspector who is going to look at quality. If you have the worst painter, the worst sheetrock guy, and you got gaps in it and everything else, and as long as they tape float and textured it, and the texture may not be even throughout, you're not going to get red tagged on your inspection, your final inspection. It's not going to happen. If those windows won't open easily, as long as they open, in the bedrooms, but if they won't open easily, they're not going to gig you on that. They're going to tell you, well, these windows aren't big enough because you need to have egress. You need to be able to get out of the house in case it catches fire. And that little 24-inch window is not going to get that done. There are things that they will look for, but they're not going to say, well, that window wasn't hung right, or you didn't use a good quality window in that, or you didn't caulk that window. Now, there are insulation inspections that are done, and the minimum is done. They look for certain things, and a lot of times outside inspectors will do that. And those outside inspectors aren't always looking at it the way you want them to look at it. So what I'm saying is this. If you believe that you're going to be protected from a bad builder or bad practices by hiring getting a permit, having the inspector do it, that's probably not going to happen. Ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to cover these things with you because I had a lot of questions about these things, these little things. I wanted to hit them all at one time, and I've gone a little long, and I do apologize. I hope it was entertaining, and I hope it was informative. But I really want you to succeed in your project. I really want you to protect yourself. And the only way you can arm yourself for protection is to have knowledge and to know what you know. Do your research. Make sure that you have a good understanding of what's going on. Now, you don't have to be experts in the construction business. I got a client right now that we are in the process of, he wants to be an expert, and I don't have time to give him 43 years worth of knowledge and experience for this one project I'm doing. You're going to have to know basic things. You don't have to be a doctor to know that you're supposed to eat right. You don't have to be a physiotherapist to know that you need to be active and you need to keep your cardio up. You don't need to be a mechanic to know that you got to keep oil in your car and keep your tires inflated. The same thing with the construction business. Common sense. This is not brain surgery. There's a lot of technical to it, and you're going to need somebody like me to do that. But overall, you can look at the job and you can see whether what you need to get done is going to get done. And last thing is, if you don't trust your builder enough that you think the city needs to protect you, pick another builder. This is not the guy or gal for you. I appreciate your time and hope to see you again.